Welcome to Spilling the Tea. This is the talk show that promises a safe space where we can share real stories about difficult topics. I'm Ana P. Santos. I'm Rappler's gender and sex columnist. Today we're going to be discussing stories of abortion, and we're going to have with us women who have come to that decision to discontinue their pregnancy. Joining me today is Christine Chan. She's a member of the Philippine Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, or PINSAN. Hi, Tin. Thanks
Hello.
for joining us.
Happy to be here.
We have panelists who are joining us today who can give more insight about how restrictive our laws are when it comes to abortion in the Philippines, what we can do about decriminalizing it, and how it will actually, benefit not just women, but also the country. Then shall we go on to introduce our panelists for today?
So we have Attorney Claire Padilla from Engender Rights. She is the Executive Director of Engender Rights, a lawyer and gender equality advocate. We also have Attorney Jihan Jacob, lawyer and senior legal advisor for Asia at Center for Reproductive Rights. Hello, Jihan.
Hi, Tin, and thanks for having me.
And we also have Shiv Belongel, the Youth Reproductive Rights Advocate and part of the Women's Global Network for Reproductive Rights. Hi, Shiv.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. To start off today's conversation, we're going to listen to the stories of two women who have made the decision to not continue their pregnancy. We're protecting the identity of our respondents because of the very restrictive abortion laws in the country. What you will see are avatars, and you will hear their voices, which have been modified. But these are their real stories. Then let's introduce our first storyteller. Let's introduce Candice, and let's listen to her story.
Okay, can we hear from you, Candice? So Candice is a 30-something-year-old woman. Please share us your story, Candice.
Okay, so it happened when I was 15. I was delayed for 2 months, and my friend and I decided to buy a pregnancy test. So, bilang 15 years old, I didn't know how to properly use pregnancy tests. So, medyo, I think yung isang nag-positive and yung isa didn't come out with any result or something. Anyway, so, paano ba? I think that people at home noticed that there might be something wrong or that, I don't know, nahalata nila eh. But maybe because they're buying my napkins, ganyan. So, napansin nila na hindi nababawasan. Anyway, they asked me, nag-pregnancy test ata ako. I didn't really remember that part. But anyway, my mom was not there. Yung lola ko lang and yung tito ko yung kasama ko sa bahay. And so, my mom was in rehab that time. When she got out of rehab, syempre, isa to sa mga diniscuss na parang she found out that I was pregnant, ganyan. 3 months na ata nun. And then, they asked me what I wanted to do with it. Kasi I was in high school and I was in 3rd year high school. Tapos, right there and then, alam ko naman na ayoko na siya ituloy. They did not ask me why, pero yun, it's also surprising that I was given a choice knowing that my family was from a nearby province, that you'd expect them to be more traditional or, more hindi ko considerate yung ganitong choice. So, tinanong nila ako. And I think I was asked twice or thrice lang. Tapos, I was firm with my decision. My mom was even telling me, kung gusto ko ituloy, they will help me raise the child. Or they will support me and I will still go to school after, ganyan. Pero sabi ko, ayoko talaga. Tapos yun, meron kaming family friend na medyo tita. Family friend naka-close, ganyan. Tapos she was the one who referred us to this place. She was also with us during the procedure. So we went there. Ano ko lang, I wasn't allowed to eat. Hindi ako pinakain from from pagising until the procedure. So, may fasting involved. Tapos, pagdating, it was an apartment disguised as placement agency. So, para siyang placement agency, kunwari, ng mga OFW. I think so that it can explain the number of different age, yung different age of women coming there. Tapos maraming babae nagpupunta doon. So, yun yung parang front. So, it was an old apartment. Tapos, so, most of the stuff na I hear only from the background habang nag-uusap sila. Kasi I was 15, so I don't really, parang nandun lang ako because I want this done. Pero hindi ako nagtatanong for myself. Nakikinig lang ako sa kanila. So, yung iba kong narinig is that it costed 15,000. So, 5,000 per month kung how far along you are. So, 5,000 for every 4 weeks of how far along you are. Tapos, that was the quote-and-quote painless package. So, may inject sa akin na hindi ko alam kung yun ba yung parang pang-control ng pain or ito yung parang induce ng contraction. Pero, naalala ko lang that during the waiting time, there was another woman in the room. She was alone. So, parang thoughts ko lang nun, shucks, siya yung hindi ko munang painless na package. So, ayun, after a few minutes of waiting, so medyo may contraction. Hindi naman contraction, parang I felt a lump on my stomach na medyo bumaksa. Tapos, they took me to another room. And the procedure was done there. Medyo groggy ako. Pero can hear mga conversations sa gilid, ganyan. Or the clanking of the devices they were using. When I had first hint that I was pregnant, yung mga ginawa ko nung una ay tumakbo ako ng tumakbo. I was very active, nagtatalon ako. Yung mga ganun. I don't know if that affected or whatever. Pero yun, so after the procedure, may mga medicines na pinauwi. Siguro tinake ko for, I think, a week. Tapos ayun, that's it. Naalala ko lang, during that day, my grandmother, so while we are in the abortion clinic, or whatever you call that, yung lola ko went to my school to enroll me for the next school year. Medyo moving forward na agad. So, summer kasi ito nangyari. Ayun. We never talked about it at home. Afterwards, may isang incident na, hindi naman incident. Pero may isang time lang na nagsisimba kami. Katabi ko yung lola ko. Tapos, there was something mentioned about abortion. Tapos, nag-react lang siya. Parang, nagbuntong hininga siya. Pero, yun. Alam mo yung she was making you hear that sigh. Parang ganon. So, yun lang. Pero other than that, wala. Wala namang, nothing was ever spoken about it. Or, kahit alam mo yun, or of course, I was still in high school that time. So, marami pa rin akong kalokohan. Pero it was never brought up again. Hindi siya sinumbat sa akin na, or anything. So, yun.
Thank you, Candice.
Looking back, Candice, if we can ask follow-up questions. Looking back at this happened a few years ago. How do you feel about the decision now, looking back on it?
Ayun, my initial reaction was, I was surprised because I was guilty, but the guilt came from not being guilty. So, parang I was made to believe na when you do something like this, dapat mag-guilty ka, dapat makonsensya ka, and I wasn't feeling any close, and yun yung source ng guilt ko. Tapos, very based on what I see in films and TV shows, nag-expect talaga ako na managinip ng masama, ng makarinig ng mga babying umiiyak, and yun talaga yung initial thoughts ko after. Pero wala. So, yun yung for a while, I was questioning myself if I'm a bad person kasi hindi ako nakonsensya. Parang ganun. More on that yung feeling. But now, looking back, parang I don't regret it at all. I was sure I wasn't ready for a baby that time. Yun. Hindi talaga. No regrets. Tapos, no guilt about the deed itself.
I've actually heard a lot of stories from women who say that, and they say exactly what you say, Candice, that, it's like the narrative has always been trying to make women feel guilty about the decision they've made. But a lot of women have said that, I decided what I thought was best for me, and I know that this is the right decision for me at that time. Candice,
Yeah,
one last question.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Christine.
I think that the media portrays abortion in a really negative way, and that stigma
Yeah.
is really, really still strong in the Philippines. And so a lot of women think that this is how they should feel. This is always what happens. But there are various stories out there, and I'm glad that we're hearing from Candice today.
Candice, just one last question. What do you want women who are listening to this, women who may be considering abortion, or maybe who are just listening and want to get a different view on the topic? Maybe some of them are even against it. But what do you want women to know about abortion and the decision to terminate a pregnancy?
I want women to know na kasi nga 'di ba yung portrayal sa media is very negative, and the stereotype story of a woman getting pregnant on the wrong time. Pero ang dami-daming reasons why women need to get an abortion. 'Di ba? Hindi lang naman yung unwanted pregnancy, but there are risks also sometimes sa pregnancy. Merong victims of abuse or rape who got pregnant because of that. So hindi lang siya, it's not just one story. Ang dami-daming reasons why women get to that point of deciding of whether or not to have an abortion. So sana wag tayong maging judgmental. And for the women who have gone through this or have made this decision, please don't think of yourself as bad people. Parang ngayon, in retrospect, ang naiisip ko, aside from the decision, ay delikado pala siya. Alam mo yun, even if I survived the procedure and everything, it wasn't 100% safe. So, sana magkaroon ng safe abortion facilities. I don't know how do you call that, pero na hindi patago or hindi parang makeshift clinics.
Thank you, Candice. And shall we hear from Sheila, who is also a 30-something woman right now and is married?
Hi. So, unlike most stories about women who choose to terminate their pregnancies, they're usually very young teenagers. They have their whole life ahead of them. For me, it was different. I was already working, I was married, but I had separated from my ex-husband with whom I had one child. And I was seeing someone new. By all markers, people would say that I would have been capable of raising a child. And it was more of a desire and not to want to go through it again for one thing. And also the added complication of there's no divorce in the Philippines. I am estranged from my ex-husband, but we're still legally married, since annulment is a very long, tedious, and expensive. And by family law, locally, any child that comes out of me is considered my husband's child, regardless of whether or not a married is proved otherwise. It's really stated there that even if adultery is proven, the child is still legally going to be my husband's child. So given that, I believed that I was really careful due to medical issues. hormonal birth control isn't really a good match for me. So we were using physical barriers. We were unsafe one time, and I had used a morning after pill. I bled. I thought it was fine. I actually went to the beach. I was very active as well. But then, after a while, I expected next period was late. So I took a test, and it came out positive against odds of it. Being that way, I was scared, mostly. I knew I couldn't. I didn't have the luxury of keeping the pregnancy. I googled a lot about what to do. I tried to be as safe as I possibly could, and I needed to ensure that it wasn't ectopic. Because if I tried to use the meds that would induce an abortion, and it was an ectopic pregnancy, there would be a chance that I would bleed out and die. There's still a chance that I would bleed out and die. But it would be a larger, much more sure thing if it was ectopic. So I had to get an ultrasound. And then I went to vendors that sold herbs. And I asked if they had the actual medicine. Then I bought it from them. Then I actually counter-checked their instructions with things that were published about how to take the medicine. And then I took it. And then I bled a little, while I bled a significant amount, but apparently not enough. Because when I had another ultrasound done to check if it had took, it showed that I was still pregnant and that the fetus had good implantation. And apparently all the things that they have been doing, they didn't actually do anything. And at that point, I was committed. I guess because even if I had changed my mind, the chances that the fetus would develop abnormalities would be like ridiculously high because of all the medicines I had already took to try to induce an abortion. So I went back to the same vendor who had given me their cell phone number, got more meds, tried it again. This time, I bled more. Then I had another ultrasound done, and it was as if nothing happened. It was not, this time it was clear. The fetus was gone. It was safe. It was as if I was never pregnant. And it was it.
Sheila, you talked more about, a parang unsafe yung route, no? Not medically very safe yung route that you had to take for terminating or discontinuing this pregnancy. Then is that also parang a consequence of, the very restrictive laws that we have on abortion? Mas
Yes.
mag-resort ka sa unsafe methods.
A lot of women actually do what Candice and Sheila did. So, for example, Candice tried running or being more active. Some people even try to hit themselves. It's not really safe, and it hurts, right? And
Yeah.
also Sheila, like she doesn't know if the medicines that she took was even the actual medicine or if it's fake. So she doesn't know what she put in her body. They're all very unsafe because we don't have access to safe and legal abortion right now.
Sheila, if we may ask also a question, looking back on this, how do you feel about the decision that you made to discontinue that pregnancy?
I'm fairly certain, like 100%, that I made the right decision. But a part of me also really strongly believes that I didn't really have much of a choice. I already have one child with my ex-husband who is not a very good person. And he is already using that one child to hurt me in various ways. having another one that he would have legal claim to is not really something that would have been good for anyone involved. Not for me, not for the child. So I really don't think that I had much of a choice. It's fortunate that it aligned with my personal preferences to not have children, but I can only imagine what it would have felt like if I had wanted to have more kids.
Do you wish that other women would have, I mean, or women, do you wish that women in the Philippines would have better choices when
Oh,
it comes
definitely.
to,
Well, our laws are very antiquated and anti-feminine, I think. As I pointed out, one day, if my ex-husband went off and impregnated someone else, that baby won't legally be mine. So why is it that if I have another baby, it would legally be his? It's a very unfair.
what would you like women to know about your story? Or just those people who are listening to today's episode? Or what would you like them to know about abortion and the decision to discontinue a pregnancy?
I guess people like to focus on the decision to terminate the pregnancy, but it's way more than that. There's a lot of history going into it, and there's a lot of future going out. And really, they like to paint women who terminate pregnancies as selfish. But I think it's infinitely more selfish to bring another life into the world and not be able to care for it the way that it deserves to be cared for.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you also, Candice. Then I think we heard a lot of different issues here from the two stories. We talked about how restrictive laws keep us from having access to safe medical abortions.
Yeah, I think it also shows how we have various other problems in the Philippines. We don't have a divorce law yet. We
Mm-mm.
also have a really high teen pregnancy rate right now. There's really a big problem in the Philippines, and we want everyone to be safe as much as possible.
And I think also what I was when I was listening to Candice and Sheila, it really brought me back to previous conversations with other women who have said that, I don't feel guilty about the choice that I made. I know that this was the best choice for me and whatever situation they were in at the time, and they were the best person to also make that informed decision. I think that the two stories helped us widen the narrative, because right now the discourse on abortion is just so much dominated by one thing, which is guilt, which is sin, which is wrongdoing, and that results into a lot of stigmatization, not just of the abortion as a medical procedure, but also of the women who decide to have it.
Yeah, these women that choose to have an abortion or choose not to continue their pregnancy, they know their lives the best, right? So
Yeah.
they should be able to decide for themselves.
And actually, the bigger issue also today is we want to discuss the decriminalizing of abortion, because our laws are so restrictive, such that, if Candice and Sheila had come out, and they could get arrested, they could be imprisoned for a maximum of 6 years for deciding to discontinue their pregnancy. And there should be no reason for a woman to be imprisoned for making such a decision. And to
Yeah,
discuss that, mhm,
and actually, like it's not just that, it's even post-abortion care. Like when they go to hospitals, if there's a complication, sometimes the stigma is so strong that the nurses or the doctors even shame them for it after, and then they even threaten that, oh, we're going to report you to the police and things like that. So it's really hard.
that's right. And I've heard also similar stories where doctors and nurses become very punitive. They they choose to continue the procedure, like if you need a dilation and or procedure, right, for this, and they do it without anesthesia, or they will deliberately shame the woman in the waiting room and say, "Oh, Miss Abortionist, halika na, ikaw na yung next." I've heard so many stories like that, of the shaming. And you're right, then, the way that the laws are framed, because they're so restrictive, and then the current discourse also is just one story about stigmatizing this decision. This is how it influences the way that society treats, views women who decide to have abortions. I think then we can jump into the questions already. We've been having a lot of questions about this topic, and I'll go right into asking Attorney Claire first. What's the legal context of abortion in the country when we say that we have one of the most restrictive abortion laws? What does that mean? What is it? What are the implications of this?
The Philippine abortion law is a restrictive abortion law. It's archaic, it's colonial, it's based on the 1930 revised penal code. It penalizes women up to 6 years imprisonment, and the same with those who are assisting them. And there are no express exceptions. So even if a woman is at risk for her life or health, and for example, even if she's a rape victim, there are no express exceptions. And this 1930 revised penal code provision is actually a direct translation from Spanish to English from the 1870 Spanish Penal Code, and can be traced back to the 1822 Old Spanish Penal Code. And if you will see, this was a time when the Spaniards were still here in the Philippines. Women were not working. They were not allowed to work, to study, and the International Human Rights Conventions were not ratified then. So this law infringes on the woman's right to bodily autonomy, to privacy. It violates the woman's right to life, health, and it does not reduce the women from inducing abortion. Women have just continued to terminate pregnancies, and unfortunately, because there's no access to safe abortion, many women have died as a result of complications from unsafe abortions. So this results in high maternal deaths. In the Philippines, we have about 1,000 women who died in 2012. So that's about 3 women who die daily from unsafe abortion complications. And women who are hospitalized because of the complications were about over 100,000. So this is one of the top 5 causes of maternal deaths here in the Philippines.
Thank you, Attorney Claire. And why do we need to change these laws now? And how will it benefit women and everyone as a whole?
Okay, so first, I'm part of the group called the Philippine Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, or PINSAN, and I drafted a bill to decriminalize abortion in consultation with reproductive women's health groups, women's rights advocates, and youth advocates. And it's really because there's clamor to decriminalize abortion. And this is because, as I mentioned, this is a public health issue. It's a life and death issue. Just in 2012, there are over 610,000 women who induced abortion unsafely. So that's why our tagline is, we want to save women's lives by decriminalizing abortion. And basically, we're saying that with women's access to comprehensive health care, women will be safe. Women will not die from complications from unsafe abortion. We're saying that this is a medical issue, not a moral issue. And unfortunately, because of the restrictive abortion law, the stigma is so grave that it's not just women who induce abortion of viable pregnancies who suffer discrimination and abuse and even delay of treatment in hospitals. So even women who present with naturally occurring medical conditions such as, for example, miscarriages, incomplete abortion, or even fetal demise, they are also denied access to post-abortion care, which is legal here in the Philippines. So what they're saying is that by decriminalizing abortion, we will respect women's rights. These are constitutional guaranteed rights to equality, non-discrimination, equal protection of the law even, and freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, among others. Also, in the context of humanitarian crisis, such as now the COVID-19 pandemic, as mentioned earlier by Tim, we have higher unintended and unwanted pregnancies. We have higher rates of rape, gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, and even sexual exploitation and trafficking. There are about 50 adolescents every week. There are about 500 rather adolescents giving birth every week, which should not be the case. And we have about 40 to 50 10 to 14-year-olds who are giving birth every week. And there's research, of course, where you have child protection units basically advocating that we should always examine for sexual abuse for ages 15 years old and below. And that's why we need access to emergency contraception. We need to address issues related to rape. We need access to safe abortion. Plus, we also need to raise the age of sexual consent to 16.
Thanks, Attorney Claire, for pointing that out.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say to Tin that, the issues outlined by Attorney Claire really highlight that there is a need. There may come a time in a woman's life where she will need to decide to discontinue a pregnancy. And there are very medical reasons also behind that. I think, Tin, this is what they say in therapeutic abortion. I think one of our panelists can talk about that. Is that right?
Yes, Attorney Jihan, can you tell us about therapeutic abortion? So what is it? And given our restrictive laws, what can we do? Like, are we allowed to do it?
Thanks, Tin. So, therapeutic abortion, this refers to abortion to save or protect the life or health of the pregnant person. And to directly answer your question, yes, therapeutic abortion is allowed, and I'll explain why, like what is our basis. So first, there is the misconception that because our laws, our revised penal code as shared by Attorney Claire, does not seem to provide for a clear exception, then it seems to prohibit all abortions. That is the misconception. But for years, we have been saying that this is not the case. This is not true. For example, under the general provisions of justification and necessity, which are the same principles under a revised penal code that allow self-defense, it can be interpreted that there is no criminal liability when an abortion is performed or provided to save the life or health of the pregnant person, because either it was done to prevent, to avoid an evil or injury, or under the impulse of an uncontrollable fear of an equal or greater injury. And we are not the only ones saying this, because last year, the government itself has made an official statement about this in a report. So in a state party report of the Philippines to the United Nations Human Rights Committee, and this committee is the body that monitors compliance with the human rights treaty that specifically deals with civil and political rights, our government reported that, and I quote, legislations on abortion to protect the right to life or health of the mother, the revised penal code, Article 11, Paragraph 4, may justify abortion to protect the life and health of the pregnant women, end quote. So Article 11, Paragraph 4, this refers to abortion done in order to avoid an evil or injury. So in effect, the government has admitted that certain abortions may be performed or provided without any criminal liability or fear of imprisonment. So again, therapeutic abortions or abortions to save or protect the life or health of a pregnant person is allowed.
Attorney Jihan, ako may follow-up question dun sa shinare nyo. So, therapeutic abortion is allowed. Does that mean that pregnant persons who need to access it because their lives are in danger have an avenue to do that?
Yes, so it's a bit tricky. So yes, they can and they should be able to. But unfortunately, this is still not the case today for many women. Because despite our laws allowing for abortion under certain circumstances, so therapeutic abortion in particular, there are what I would consider like three main barriers. So first, there is not enough awareness. So not enough awareness that this is possible actually and legal under our current laws. We are still stuck on that we have restrictive laws and that there are no clear exceptions. And second, there is this continuing fear of criminal liability among healthcare providers and pregnant persons of potential repercussions under our current penal laws. And third, I think it would be because of the heightened stigma, which are the negative attitudes or beliefs against healthcare providers who provide their support and pregnant persons who have abortion. So I would attribute to these three main barriers why in reality hindi pa rin talaga maka-access ng therapeutic abortions ang karamihan despite it being legal under our laws. And as long as abortion is under our penal laws, the fear, the stigma, the lack of awareness, and the misconceptions about when abortion may be allowed will remain, and which is why I think it is crucial that we decriminalize abortion, as we have mentioned before, so as also emphasized by Attorney Claire. But it is also important to remember that even without decriminalizing abortion, our laws, as they are now, therapeutic abortions may already be provided and performed.
Attorney Jihan, that's why I also posed that question about therapeutic abortion. I had written a column about this some years ago for Rappler, and it was precisely about how therapeutic abortion is a medical procedure that some women may need, over the course of their pregnancy. After that column came out, one of the readers called the newsroom to ask how she could get in touch with me. So yung gusto niya talaga akong makausap. And she called me to say that she was pregnant, she planned that pregnancy, and she and her partner were anticipating that pregnancy. They were excited about it, but the development was such that 2 ultrasounds showed that there was fetal abnormality and her pregnancy was not viable. It was necessary to discontinue the pregnancy for medical reasons. It would threaten her life if she did not do that. Ngayon, kaya siya lumapit sa akin, Attorney Jihan, because she said she went to 2 different doctors to get a second opinion. And the doctors couldn't even say the word abortion. Sinasabi daw sa kanya, hindi viable ang pregnancy mo, kaya kailangan mong magpa-A. And she was very disappointed na these doctors who, she had trusted to safeguard her health and her life couldn't help her do it. What about you, Attorney Jihan? What are your experiences in your work with women and the need for therapeutic abortions and the barriers to accessing it?
Yes, thank you, Anna. And so I think many women are still not able to access therapeutic abortion, and many are not maybe as fortunate as the woman who have reached out to you, or even as Candice and Sheila. And I think we should also, the story, particularly the woman who have reached out to you, I think it also points out to one of misconceptions surrounding that abortion is sought only for unwanted pregnancies, because they can be sought for wanted pregnancies, but for other reasons na yun na nga yung when it comes to therapeutic abortion. And as I've been working at the Center for Reproductive Rights and together with our partners, we've done fact-finding missions, roundtable and focus group discussions, interviews with both providers and women who have sought abortion either successfully and unsuccessfully. To link it to our discussion on therapeutic abortion, I remember this story of Heidi, who is a married mother of one living in an informal settlement in Manila City. And naalala ko yung kwento niya kasi her story reflects how women are risking their lives when they are denied abortion, and how they continue to risk their lives and also expose themselves to harassment if they eventually seek one. So yung kwento niya, she developed severe hypertension during her first pregnancy. And during her second pregnancy, she suffered a stroke that left her face temporarily paralyzed, and that ultimately led to the termination of that pregnancy, of the second pregnancy. And as a result of her medical history, yung severe hypertension niya, she was warned not to become pregnant again because it could be fatal. But due to financial barriers, hindi nila afford yung contraceptives, practical barriers as well, that she cannot find a suitable contraceptive given her medical condition, she experienced 2 subsequent pregnancies. And fearing for her life, she sought not to continue both pregnancies. Pero despite her fatal condition, private doctors denied her request on both occasions because, as we also mentioned before, nandun pa rin na it was considered a sin. And she was forced to resort to induce an abortion by herself by taking an abortion pill at home without medical guidance. And while the first attempt did not result in any serious complications, yung second attempt niya caused heavy bleeding, and it was for more than 4 weeks. And she tried to seek post-abortion care or the medical treatment for abortion complications at a government hospital. And this also brings back to the point that was raised by Tin earlier, na women are facing harassment and abuse even for post-abortion care because in Heidi's case, she was coerced into admitting that she induced an abortion. Pinagalitan din siya for committing a sin, and she was also threatened to be reported to the NBI. And there are so many other women that we've met and who have shared their stories with us, and most, if not all of their stories, really reflect the stigma, the intimidation, the threat, and the fear that women experience even when abortion may be legally provided. So again, therapeutic abortions. And the stories of Heidi and these other women, Anna, the woman that you've met, Candice and Sheila, reflect how their fundamental human rights, from their rights to life, to health, to equality and non-discrimination, to be free from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, which are all guaranteed under our constitution and laws, are violated, and all these violations should stop.
Anna, I want to include something on therapeutic abortion. People sometimes do not realize that, for example, adolescents are at high risk for unsafe abortion. One, because of their young age. Second, because they do not have financial access and even physical access to safe abortion providers. Another is that if they continue to carry on with the pregnancy to term, they are actually at risk of dying from the childbirth itself. So there have been cases throughout the world, including the Philippines, where adolescents died during childbirth. And this is even cited in the explanatory note of the Decriminalization of Abortion bill. For example, I know of one case also where she was raped. She was 19 years old, an adolescent. She became pregnant as a result of the rape. Unfortunately, she was forced to carry the pregnancy to term. The day after she gave birth, she had dwarfism condition. And this is risky. This is one, risky because of her age, and two, risky because of her dwarfism condition. And usually people with dwarfism condition would be 4 feet 9 inches or less. And so the day after she gave birth, she died. So these are clear examples of Filipino women. I spoke to her mother, where they are at risk of dying without access to safe abortion. There are, of course, other women. One is a 19-year-old raped by the stepfather who died because of complications from unsafe abortion. And so these are things that we do not want to happen apart from other pregnancy conditions. And we are also trying to popularize, of course, that therapeutic abortion, even our law professors, for example, Father Bernas, who is a priest and a constitutionalist, he would say that to save the life of the woman, therapeutic abortion is allowed. And of course, us, the reproductive rights advocates, we say that this would be for the full range of reasons, in any kind of reason that a woman might need safe abortion services.
And I like how today's discussion with the insights brought forth by Attorney Jihan and Attorney Claire really kind of lend the context to the stories of Sheila and Candice. And it's really widening the discussion about abortion and why we really need to destigmatize the way that we talk about it.
Yeah, we really need to talk about it because no woman should be imprisoned for making decisions for her life, health, and future. And also, she should not be forced to undergo these dangerous situations just because of the restrictive laws or because of the shame, stigma, and guilt and judgment.
Currently, a lot of youth groups, a lot of young feminists are also rallying behind this cause to decriminalize abortion. I think we have a panelist who is representing our youth sector who can give us an idea of why this issue is also very important and crucial to young people and why they're rallying behind it.
So we have Shiv Belongel from WGNRR, and we'd like to know, Shiv, what about this movement has sparked the activism among young people and among young groups?
Hello everyone! So, una sa lahat, nakakatuwa na marinig na mas maraming kabataan yung who are getting to know the advocacy and gustong makibahagi dito. So, we've learned about a group recently called Amarella that is more or less like a self-organized group of very young people. I think mga high school or early college age who have been very active in disseminating information about safe abortion and being publicly supportive of decriminalization despite the stigma surrounding the issue. Of course, as you would expect, this also subjected to a lot of harassment. So when we learned about it in the Philippine Safe Abortion Advocacy Network and in our young feminist circles, we tried our best to support them by opening up platforms for them to go and report when they're being harassed so we could help them also in defending the advocacy. On your question regarding why there's this activism in young people for safe abortion advocacy, I can't speak for Amarella or all the groups, but as a young person myself, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is relevant to our lives because we are already confronted with the possibility of sex, if not already engaged in it. If young people aren't yet engaged in it, their peers probably are. I think a 2013 study, yung Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study, I don't know if there's a more recent one that came out, but in 2013, around a third, 32% of Filipino youth were already said to be sexually active. So, you can only expect that to increase. It's been 7 years since. I think, being confronted with sex and surrounding issues, that's what it was for me personally. Even before I solidified my position on abortion, when I was younger, I knew that if ever I were ever placed in a position where I would have to choose, I would like to have my options. I would like to be able to choose. So I'm also very lucky, I guess. I'm privileged because I'm exposed to information. Of course, now there's a lot of information available to young people through the internet and social media. So you get information in ways you could never have. I think this helps in facilitating information to young people and allowing them also to kind of figure out where they stand based on research, facts, what they learn from the internet. So it's only later on, just learning more about the issue, that I would become more resolute in my position. But I think like a key point has to be made here with regard to access to information and all the internet, social media. Yes, there is a lot of information, but it's not always the right information, or it's not always socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And if young people are hearing about abortion, young people in the Philippines, where it's a highly stigmatized issue, are hearing about it in ways that are relevant and acceptable to them, I think there's so much to thank older advocates for, in that sense, for pushing progressive values as long as they have, and for taking up these difficult issues. Like people like Attorney Claire, for example, have been advocating not only for access to safe abortion, but women's rights and LGBTQI rights all their lives. So they make it possible for us young people to involve ourselves in this advocacy and to learn more about it. So yeah, that we're at this point that abortion is again up for discussion, and there's this sense that young people are helping push it. I think that's owed to years of groundwork and just building up our resources and network as advocates. So there's still so much to find out, I'm sure. But I think our message is really resonating with young people. It's because I think we're clear that, you know, we want to give women options when they're ever faced with a particular situation, and that's not something like we can judge them for. It's also really encouraging to hear like analysis from really young people saying that abortion is a social justice issue. Things like this, that, you know, access to safe abortion is will help the poorest and most marginalized women the most. So
I like that you touched on very different topics, and all of those intersect. You know, when I was listening to you, Shif, I heard about inequality, you know, resulting in unequal access to information and also to services. And also the youth who are being assertive about what their rights are. I'm not saying that that's not to be misconstrued by those listening, that, you know, young people now have more loose morals. I'm a lot older. Trust me, we thought about these things. I have friends who talked about wishing that they had access to abortion way back. It's just that we couldn't talk about it freely. And I think now that, you know, with more information and the young people are more empowered also to make informed opinions about issues. Tin, yes, you were saying something.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add that with what Shiv mentioned, like the mental toll it takes on every person who's thinking like, am I pregnant now? Like, what can I do about it? Not having access to safe and legal abortion takes a mental toll on us, and that shame and guilt that we will feel if ever we are put in that position is very hard.
yes, definitely. I think everything you're saying, like like now that mental health, for example, is such an important thing for young people. That's also an angle I think that helps in pushing the advocacy, because they know that these issues are connected. So you can see that access to safe abortion is really like an intersectional issue. It's it intersects with mental health. It intersects with class inequality. It's a women's rights issue. It's also an issue for non-binary persons. So there.
Then let's go to the questions that we've been getting already about this topic. I'm going to ask the panel this question. This came in anonymously, which is fine, so we can get the questions that people really want to ask. So, what are the measures taken when a minor is the one asking for an abortion?
What we're saying, for example, in the proposed bill, is that there should not be any kind of restriction as to adolescence, as to age, because we do recognize the evolving capacities of children and adolescents. So what we're saying is that any kind of access to safe abortion should be provided to all ages, all kinds of gender identity, even, for example, what Shiv mentioned in terms of persons with diverse gender identities as well. And then we appeal to the parents, the health providers, to respect these adolescents' rights, because what we're saying is that, as I mentioned earlier, this is a life and death issue, especially of adolescents, because of their young age, their risky pregnancies and childbirth. And just to add as well to what Shiv mentioned earlier, as regards the young people who are inducing abortion, they're actually almost 50% of those who induce abortion. And apart from the young age, is also, as what Shiv mentioned, is the poor people, who are about 2/3 of those who induce abortion, and mostly unsafely because of lack of access to safe abortion. So making it a class issue as well.
Attorney Claire, there's a follow-up question. So what about in the case where their parents or their guardians disapprove of their decision? What can be done about it?
Okay, so basically, there's recognition that even with access to contraceptives, if, even under the RH law, in fact, what the Supreme Court actually prohibited is that there should not be any penalty for anyone who's asking for parental consent. So the trick there is to look for a health provider who's willing to provide to an adolescent and respect the adolescent's rights. So basically here we're saying that people should break mindsets as regards the evolving capacities of adolescents, and that the guardians, there's also, and then the parents as well, to respect the adolescent's decision, because these are precisely the bodies and the lives and health of the adolescents who are at stake in this matter.
Can I just add on that? Aside from national laws and policies, I would like us to look also at the international human rights standards on this issue, and particularly on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the Philippine government has signed and ratified, and therefore it is binding on us. And the Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is the UN body that monitors compliance with this treaty, has recognized that the risk of death and disease during adolescent years is real, including from preventable causes, includes childbirth and unsafe abortion. So Attorney Claire has mentioned earlier about these experiences of, or the heightened risk of, or increased risk of adolescents giving birth at such an early age. And the Committee on the Rights of the Child has specifically recommended that governments should decriminalize abortion to ensure that girls have access to safe abortion and post-abortion services, and that legislations are reviewed to ensure that they guarantee the best interests of pregnant adolescents, and that their views, so the adolescents' views, are always heard and respected in abortion-related decisions. And I think that is really very important. And aside from the Committee on the Rights of the Child, there have been other UN and regional human rights bodies which have agreed that denial of abortion for a child or an adolescent may amount to grave human rights violation. And that includes the rights to privacy, to the right to special protection as a minor, access to legal remedies, again, freedom from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, and freedom from gender stereotyping. So looking from both the national laws and policies and from international human rights standards, we are saying that if we deny adolescents access to abortion, then we are also violating their fundamental human rights.
There's a follow-up question related to that. Schiff, I think you may want to take this. Since the younger generation is the one more open to abortion and the health reasons surrounding it, is it fitting that we call for some kind of abortion education for the older generation?
Well, personally, I think everyone should take up the advocacy of safe abortion and learning more about it. But if you're a young person and you feel particularly passionate about it, there are resources available, I think, to help you talk to your family, talk to your friends, so they understand this issue, like sans all the stigma, maybe from like a different perspective, like public health or human rights, things that we've discussed. I also have this hunch though that like the story earlier, I think it was Candice, that parents are, when it happens to their children, a lot of parents would actually like bring up the option or like be open to considering it, because they also know like what a burden, you know, how different your life can be. It's just that it's all spoken in like hush hush, like, you know, like what happened to her. They didn't even really talk about it after, but they did allow her to go through the procedure, and they weren't like extremely against it or anything like that. So I think you can see there that there is this kind of, if it happens to your child, you're more or less open to the option. But because of the public, discourse surrounding it, you're not going to be parang publicly supporting it. But I think that's where like things like empathy come in, and I think where a lot of young people are like coming from is they know that if this is something they want for themselves, this is also something like they should, like others have access to.
Right. And if I may add, Anna, in trainings and in actual experiences, I have seen people who have supported issues related to access to safe abortion, if it involves, for example, their wives, their daughters, their sisters, their best friends, their niece, for example. So here is, as what Shiv mentioned, we'd like people to be more compassionate, to empathize with what other people are suffering, for example, in terms of mental health and all. And then just to sum it up as well, in terms of fighting for women's rights to equality and non-discrimination, this is still part of the fight for example, from 1930s, women's right to vote, women's right to work, study, and all, including the right to contraceptives, the right to sexual education. When we fought for the passage of the RH bill into law, the passage, of course, of the divorce law in the Philippines. In fact, it's not even passage; it's
I'm waiting for it.
Right. It was already allowed in the Philippines. So what we're saying is that it should be repassed. And in the right to SOGI, for example, the prohibition against discrimination, gender recognition, marriage equality, and all. This is all part of it. This is even all part of the rights to privacy, where government should not intervene. So that would include the right to safe abortion. And of course, repealing discriminatory laws against women. This is all part of the fight.
I think there's a point there to be made also about how, you cannot also discuss the right to abortion without discussing an attendant issue. Well, there are many, but one is what you brought up earlier, teen pregnancies. We have one of the highest rates of teen pregnancies in the world. And I think there needs to be an added component of educating everyone about how teens who are pregnant are so much more at risk and should have an option to consider discontinuing their pregnancy. And as I really like what Shiv mentioned, it's so easy to stand against or oppose something, especially something as controversial as abortion, when it doesn't happen to you, or when you don't have a point in your life and you need to think about making that decision. But I like so much what Shiv mentioned in the stories that we heard. When it happens to someone you love, when it happens to your wife, your sister, your niece who is a teenager, then you really begin to rethink the rigidity of laws and how they need to be more compassionate so that they are more attached and connected to the lived experiences of people.
I also think that empathy is really important so that we can see ourselves in other people's shoes, what their experiences are, and so we don't have to judge them for what their decisions are. We should let other people decide for themselves.
I'd like to add about social costs. What we forget sometimes on the issue of access to safe abortion is what many of the panelists and hosts mentioned earlier, that when a person, for example, an adolescent, carries the pregnancy to term, gives birth at an early age, it's an unintended pregnancy, many times they stop schooling, and because they stop schooling, they would eventually lack career opportunities. This would lead to oftentimes poverty as well, and then this becomes a cycle. Sometimes I've met people when we were doing research on the lack of access to contraceptives in Manila City. I met some of them at age 24, and then after 5 years later, I meet their adolescent daughters at 14 who are already pregnant as well. So here you would see it becomes a cyclical generational issue of poverty, of social costs, of lack of access to safe abortion.
There was a question, were there any regrets after the procedure? If yes, have you gotten over the regrets and how did you move on? I like this question because it points to the answers that we got earlier today by the real stories of Sheila and Candice. Alam mo, Tin, when I was listening, one of them said na, I actually regret not having any regrets. And I felt when I was listening to their stories and also the sharing of the different panelists, these are the silent conversations that women have had. Pag tayo-tayo lang. Some women don't regret it. Kasi they know that I am the one who knows best about my future and my body. And I would like to have this choice. And I was given a latitude to make that decision and they don't regret it. Ang sinabi pa nga nila was 100% certain that this was the right decision for me to take. So tama rin na pag ilagay natin yon na, hindi lang tayo nakakonfine sa very guilt-ridden narratives and positions when it comes to abortion.
Yes, Anna. So actually, when I talk to Sheila and Candice, like they tell me that if they were to make the same decision again, now that knowing everything that they know now, they would still make the same decision. So we should really allow people to decide for themselves.
And if I remember right, then they even said now they wished other women had access to that decision also. Dun sa storya nila.
Yeah, it's really important that we take action now. We support the decriminalization bill, and so that every woman doesn't have to make that hard decision.
Attorney Jihan, you were saying?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to add, kasi yung narrative about guilt, about shame of having an abortion, I think this is a narrative that is primarily pushed by those who oppose abortion.
Yes.
Because we must remember that pregnant persons seek abortion for a myriad of reasons. They undergo different experiences, feel different emotions because they are different persons under different circumstances. So, hindi natin sila pwedeng ikahon lang at sabihin na like, abortion, kapag ginawa nila, they would regret and they would feel guilty. And second, studies have shown that this is actually false. I mean, like formal research and studies. And they have debunked this prevailing narrative of having negative emotions after an abortion. And I'd like to point out this, one of the most recently concluded studies, which was published earlier this year. And it tracked the experiences of 1,000 women in the US who either received an abortion or were denied one. And this study ran for 5 years. And overall, researchers found that women and their families saw long-term harms when they were denied wanted abortions. And short-term, they were also more likely to suffer anxiety and loss of self-esteem after being denied an abortion. So yung negative na emotions is actually related when they are being denied. Kasi this study found that women who received abortions overwhelmingly felt relief and continued to feel that their decision had been right, even after 5 years after the decision has been made. And that study particularly found that 95% of women, so almost 10, perfect 10 na, 9 out of 10, reported that having an abortion was the right decision from them. And although we have not had a similar comprehensive research done in the Philippines about how women feel after an abortion, but as we heard from Candice and Sheila and from our own personal interactions and encounters with others who have gone through the same situation, their stories and testimonies actually affirm this research findings. So, hindi totoo yung narrative na yun.
Yeah, it's really important that that we have proper representation in media, and so that people will see that there are various stories, and we should act now, because like for years the opposition have been sharing these narratives that are not true, and studies have shown, according to Attorney Jihan, that it's not actually the case. So we need to share more, we need to talk about it more.
I think we have time for one last question. Yes? Okay, Attorney Claire, before we go to the last question.
Okay. Well, just to add as well, for those who are opposed to the decriminalization of abortion, no one is forcing them to undergo an abortion. Just like divorce, no one is forcing them to divorce their faithful husbands if their husbands are faithful. So in this case, this would be for women, for persons who are pregnant, who need access to safe abortion.
And I think it's also entirely possible. I get questions like that from young feminists who say that I would not want that procedure for myself, but I would want other women who may be not in my same kind of situation, access to resources and information. I would like them to have that choice and not be judged for it, or not have to resort to unsafe means to do it. And that's also perfectly fine. Right? Okay, one last question here. This is about therapeutic abortion. Who are the medical practitioners that can do this? And second, what can be done to make medical practitioners feel more comfortable about doing this? Because as you said, Attorney Jihan, it's lawful, right? It's allowed by our laws.
So yeah, briefly, what we placed in the bill is that in any kind of emergency abortion care, which is actually provided already in the anti-hospital deposit law. It already provides, that law, the anti-hospital deposit law, already provides for emergency care. So for example, if it's a therapeutic abortion that's needed, there is risk to the life or serious disability to the person, the woman should have access to the medical procedure. It's an emergency procedure, and this is legal under the anti-hospital deposit law. Plus those who seek post-abortion care, whether they induce the abortion for a viable procedure or they suffer a miscarriage, they can, of course, seek post-abortion care. And as I've said, post-abortion care, even for induced abortion, is legal. Of course, for natural occurrences such as miscarriage, incomplete abortion, and fetal demise, these are all legal access to post-abortion care. So what we're saying is that basically health providers should study the existing law and under their ethics, they should save a person's life. In other legal commentaries, under the bill that we are pushing for, we already mentioned that there are many lawyers, many doctors, many of them professors of forensic medicine, who have come out with their commentaries in their books that access to safe abortion is legal to save the life of the woman. We also have a Supreme Court case where it was mentioned that for medical necessity, abortion is allowed. And there are doctors out there performing therapeutic abortion because to their minds, this is justified under the provision of justified actions under the revised penal code. And so what we're saying is that people should have access to these kinds of services. And with the decriminalization of abortion, this will leave any kind of misunderstanding, misinterpretation, or restrictive interpretation, plus provide wide access to safe abortion for all grounds, not just for therapeutic and medical necessity, to post-abortion care, which is legal, and even access to drugs, for example, which are wide-acting and are not just used for example, not just for abortion, but also for postpartum hemorrhage, for ulcers and all. And these are all essential medicines that could save women's lives.
Thank you very much, Attorney Claire. Tiyan, ang dami natin pinag-usapan today. And I think that, thinking about everything that I've learned from the real stories of Sheila and Candice is that we really need to think and discuss abortion in a more compassionate way. Actually, sa laws nga natin, there are already provisions that allow you to have a therapeutic abortion and compassionate post-abortion care.
Yeah, these are really not talked about right now, and the stigma is really, the stigma has everyone hiding, has everyone cowering, and we really should talk about it more.
Para sa last question natin dito sa panel, let's throw this in to everyone in the panel. What would the world, the country look like? Let's reimagine the country where abortion is decriminalized. What would it look like and how would it be?
I think Philippines, where abortion is decriminalized, it would be a country that has laws which truly respects the fundamental human rights of each individual, and that includes ensuring their pregnant person's agency, bodily autonomy, and well-being. It will be a country that has laws grounded in evidence, and a country that is a step closer to ending discriminatory stereotypes, particularly those that are related to a person's biological ability to bear children. It will be a country that treats abortion like any other medical procedure or reproductive health service, as it should be. And a country that acknowledges that pregnant persons who decide not to continue with their pregnancies do not deserve to be in jail just for exercising their fundamental rights. And for me, that's how our country should be in reality. So not just in our imagination.
Salamat, Attorney Jihan. Attorney Claire.
Well, to me, with law that would allow for safe abortion, we will have a legal scenario where the rights of women, adolescent girls, and persons with diverse gender identities will be treated equally. There would be non-discrimination. It's a way to eliminate discrimination against women and all those with diverse gender identities. To me, it will lessen social costs in terms of unintended pregnancies, early pregnancies, and then even maternal deaths and morbidities. There have been research, for example, of the number of orphan children, for example, because of maternal death. So these are clear issues where even poverty would be lessened because women and other pregnant persons who would have access to safe abortion would not be burdened with unintended, unwanted pregnancies. Rape survivors will be empowered and would transcend being victims and become survivors where they are able to fight for their full rights. So to me, this would be a good law to help women, adolescents, and persons with diverse gender identities in terms of equality and non-discrimination and fulfillment of their rights.
Thank you, Attorney Claire. Okay, Shiv, let's go to you. As a young person, what would a Philippines that has decriminalized abortion look like and feel like?
Well, for me, a Philippines where abortion is decriminalized, hopefully is a Philippines where people are more open to talking about these issues, to talk about their sexuality and their sexual and reproductive health needs, and that they're actually able to address these needs because we understand that, you know, these our sexual and reproductive health, this aspect of our lives is something that is essential, and it is well within our rights to make demands according to our SRHR needs. Yeah.
Can I also add something, Anna?
Yes, of course, Tin. I was just about to ask you because, as co-hosting of this panel, I would love to hear what you think about, what a Philippines would look like if we just decriminalize abortion.
I think it's also important to talk about the Philippines as a secular state, and that hopefully in the future where decriminalization, like abortion is decriminalized, we are a secular state where we don't have to follow the rules of some people, some religious opinions on morality because they said so, and that everyone can have their rights and it's not based on anyone's religion.
I want to put forth my own share ko lang, #SKL, right? I think listening to all of you, I could begin to imagine what a Philippines would look like if we had just decriminalized abortion. For one is, there's also a prevailing narrative that says, yung mga nagpapa-abort or yung mga pro-abortion, yung kinokopya lang nila yung mga Western ideals, hindi naman yan para sa atin eh. We're Filipino. We don't subscribe to Western ideals like that. That's not true. We know of Filipino women who have made the decision to discontinue a pregnancy. And to me, a Philippines where this procedure is decriminalized and, as Attorney Jihan said, thought of as just a regular medical procedure is a Philippines where a woman who lives in a posh subdivision, who has the financial means to go outside of the country to seek an abortion in a country that she prefers, would have the same and equal right as that woman who lives in an urban slum community, who wouldn't know where to go and whose choices are so much more limited. Both of them should have an equal access to the right to choose. Because all of the women who we talked about and the research has shown that women don't regret this decision as long as they were in a position where they made an informed choice and they were given the latitude and respect to make that decision based on their own dignity and what their evaluation is of their life circumstances. Ang dami natin pinag-usapan, Tin. And I really like that we have this safe space to discuss these opinions and these insights that normally we wouldn't be able to do. This is exactly the kind of safe space that She Decides, the organization that's putting this together for us, would like to put forward. So they've been lobbying for the last 3 years to have platforms like this so that young women can speak up and stand up also for what their rights are and, to advocate for policies and laws that will allow them to make informed decisions about their life, their body autonomy, and their future. All of those are connected. All of those decisions are connected.
I also just want to add a quote from their manifesto that she at all times must be able to decide for herself in an environment safe and free from judgment. So that's really something that we want to happen.
And I think that's also the goal of decriminalizing abortion in the country. Thank you so much, Tin, for joining us today for this episode of Spilling the Tea. Thank you to all our panelists, Attorney Claire, Attorney Jihan, and Chip, for joining us and sharing your insights. And to everyone today who is listening and keeping an open mind about abortion as a topic and as a medical procedure and as a right for a woman to choose. This is Ana P. Santos. I'm the Rappler Sex and Gender columnist, signing off. Thank you very much for joining us.
When she decides the world is better, stronger, safer, she decides whether, when, and with whom to have sex, to fall in love, to marry, to choose when and how to carry. She has the right to choose. She has the right to information, to healthcare, to feel pleasure, and that with her body shouldn't always be the degree in which she is measured. She is free, just like you, just like me, free from pressure, Free to use contraception, to access abortion safely. Do not put your locks on her body, and better yet, not her mind, because she's free to decide. Free from judgment, from fear, from harm, and let's be clear that when others decide for her, she could face violence, oppression, forced marriage. She faces risks to her health, to her dignity, to her dreams, to her life. So I want to live in a world where every girl, every woman can decide what to do with her body, with her life. A world where every girl, every woman can decide what to do with her body, with her life, without question. Because when she does not decide, she cannot create the life that she deserves, the family that she wants, a future to call her own. So we, and you, and he, and they, we are uniting, standing together with her, so she can make decisions only she should make, and only her. Political leadership and social momentum are coming together like never before, but we gotta go further, we gotta do more. From today, we fight against fear. We right the wrongs. We mobilize political and financial support. We work to make laws and policies just, not only just for her, but for all of us. We stand up for what is right. And together, we create the world that is better, stronger, safer. But only if and only when she decides.